All right. Good morning. Happy Saturday. I think the weekend's here, and today we're going to begin addressing again the basics. Many of you watched me for years. Some of you are new and just kind of sitting in the background, but I think that it's time after all these years we go back to the basics because the presumption is those of you that have been around a long time that we need to consider those that are new. And sometimes we need to look at what we haven't thought about in a while, and that's to kind of rehash and learn what we may have forgotten or even brush up on it. So before I get started today, my name is Jay. I am the owner of Section8Consulting.com. We work with a bunch of clients every year to help them navigate the system. So why do I own this company and why do I do what I do? Well, it's very simple. The system has been around a long time, about 80 years. And I mean by the system, I mean Section 8 and housing authorities and HUD and the government. And through all that wondrous thinking and big college degrees, those people never seem to have managed to actually allocate any federal funds to actually teaching people anything about the system. And so housing authorities, while are there to fund and receive funding to qualify you guys to get housing vouchers and other things, they're not educators. They don't answer a lot of questions, and often many of you are set back or upset by the way that it does operate. It's difficult. It's complex. It's kind of like court system, in the beginning, probably when courts started thousands of years ago, anybody could have defended themselves, but now they have all this legal jargon. You need an attorney. Well, HUD, like every other federal agency, has managed to convolute itself. And through the process, you almost need a consultant to explain to you how the system actually works. Sad, but it's the reality. And it's an unfriendly system. People aren't necessarily nice. And to the presumption of most, housing authority employees, housing authorities, and HUD may not necessarily give a damn about your story, whether you make it or whether something happens to you. It's a difficult system. All right, so today I want to talk a little bit, and I've got some notes here because even I have to brush up myself. So the basic criteria for receiving housing or qualifying for it, whether it's a voucher or any other version of this, comes down to a few fundamental things. One is going to be your income. And for those of you that are on your phone, TV, computer, desktop, laptop, whatever, you'll find in the description that I put AMIs or area medium incomes as prescribed by the feds, which is HUD. So we're going to talk about what we call the 50-30 rule. Let's think of, we're going to do this in an elementary way. Let's think of incomes as, we'll throw out a broad number, 100,000 per your city. Let's say the average middle class people make $100,000 in your county. So 50% of that would be 50,000, and that would help you qualify. And if if that's the top range where they give out 25% of all vouchers and housing, then what is the low end of that? It would be 30% of the area medium income, and 30% of 100,000 would be 30,000. Now, keep in mind, I'm just using a broad number of 100,000. It's different, and that's why I encourage you to look at the AMI or area medium incomes link to the feds that I put in this video, so you'll understand what it is. Now, also make sure you double check that against your local housing authority, because sometimes HUD and housing authorities don't agree on AMIs, but this is a good guide to see. So what happens when you're 30% AMI, or they call, you have low income, then they have a different category of hell, which is extreme low income. At 30% or 30,000, that's where 75% of all offerings, vouchers, and housing are given. So the lower you're doing, the worse you're doing, the better. And let's talk about absolute zero. I've had clients that almost burned their own cases because they tell me, hey, Jay, you know what? I'm reaching out to you. Things are so bad right now. I have zero income. If you have zero income, then you're dealing with the wrong system. The housing authority requires that there is a 70-30 rule. Now, we already talked about 30 and 50s being area medium incomes. Let's talk about 30-70. So the housing authority will determine how much rent you can spend based on a lot of factors. And you must pay 30% of your income. So let's throw out a loose number. Let's pretend that your job or your Social Security check is $1,000. You will pay out approximately $300 as your portion of the rent, and the housing authority will cover the other 70%. So keep those two things in mind: 30, 50. 30% of the median income means 75% of all vouchers are being issued in that, for that respect. And then the 50% rule, which is the last 25%. Okay. And then the 30/70 rule speaks to how much rent you owe and how much the housing authority is going to pay. So that's why these two different dynamics, you need to remember those things. Now let's talk about family composition. And in a simpler way is how many people, how many heartbeats are going to be in the home. Family composition matters in terms of those that are 18 and older. Now, if you've got a bunch of children and so on, they're not income earners. They're not going to receive a Social Security check, and they may even receive Social Security disability. But I think the more important factor here is the first person, if there's a single person, and this is a big argument, so let's cover this particular part before I move on and deeper into it. But if you're a single person, you have just as good odds to get a housing voucher as anybody else. The internet is filled with speculation and people that have never read a policy procedure. They're not a consultant. They're just simply sitting around with a cup of coffee and a head full of gossip. And they publish nonsense all over the internet. So they're looking for other victims to read their trash. There's no reality in that. In fact, I would estimate that over 70% of all housing voucher recipients are single individuals, veterans, seniors, so on, by themselves. So it's not true. And let's also dispel some old rumors and prejudicial behavior. Being a particular color or shade of color or having between 1 and 50 children does not qualify you for a housing choice voucher. It was that kind of prejudicial behavior and thinking of the 80s that got ourselves in trouble as a present. Respectfully, all colors receive vouchers, and respectfully, it doesn't matter how many children. Your children do not play a factor into whether or not you receive a voucher. So if you're in a hurry to get pregnant 30 to 40 times, and let me give you a good example. My grandmother's side, French people have an unrealistic ability to produce children. Okay. Let's speak about that for a minute. Grandma had 17 siblings. My grandfather had 21. Now, I know times are tough, and maybe that's the only way you can have fun, but good Lord, we didn't need all those extra French people in the state of Louisiana, did we? Now, half those people probably didn't go on to live very good lives. That only means I come from as real family as everybody else. Everybody's got a hot mess in their family. All right, moving on from that. So we understand now that qualification for incomes and being extreme low income at 30% of your area medium income means that you've already figured out one quintessential way that you can guarantee a higher ratio of consideration. In other words, your higher preference, you're going to be, you have higher odds. It doesn't mean you're higher on the list. It just means your odds just changed a lot. So if you're broke like a joke or near it or on a fixed income, then your odds have changed. Okay. Doesn't mean you're going up that list. Preferences and odds are two different things, right, guys? And so family composition. It's helpful sometimes to have multiple people in the family, especially if you have a big income earner. Then you can dilute that big income by having several more people in the home. It also helps a little bit in terms of getting extra bedrooms. But you can be a single person and get an additional bedroom through an accommodation because of medical equipment, all kinds of reasons, so long as you're not trying to play the system. We have enough players and actors out there that did that kind of game back in the 80s, which is part of the reason they tightened the purse strings through the federal system when people try to game the system. States that were especially good at that were New York and New Jersey. Now, my good folks out in New York and New Jersey know what I'm talking about. Those generational vouchers where mama pass it on to her daughter and her daughter to her child, now to the grandbaby, and the same old hustle plays out 40 years. So the sword does cut both ways, guys. You hear me talk a little nonsense about the housing authorities? Well, I'll do the same for those of you that own vouchers and do games like that. That's what makes the system tough. So if we're going to own the truth, let's own all of it. Stop the nonsense with the multi-generational games. Okay. It's time to inspire yourself and teach your children to move on to bigger, better things than trying to live off a voucher and whenever possible. All right, moving on from there. Legal status. Now, I know we're about to pop into politics a little bit, but it's not about politics, is it? If you are a citizen, if you're an American and born here, you qualify. If you've gone down and you've immigrated here legally, you have a right. If you're here because of a situation or a war where you were in fear for your life and you have a legal status to be here, then you have a right. But I want to tell you something, guys. Where you go up in arms and decide to pull out a box of matches and a gasoline can at my office, it does not mean that people from Ukraine, Russia, or even Mexico or South America are flooding in to get Section 8 vouchers. The United States government funds those programs a different way, and they don't have any interaction with the system that most Americans are using, okay? So let's dispel that real quick. Now we're going to talk about the low and dirty and the ugly. Criminal records. They matter to some degree. If you have been charged with a crime in the past 5 years that may have included the use, manufacture of, or distribution of methamphetamines, the feds especially hate that. They've written special legislation. So please put the meth pipe down. You cannot have a voucher plus that. All right. Other drugs, period, are just bad. Okay. But I know a lot of you guys smoke a little grass, you know. Let me tell you something about drugs and convictions. If you're using marijuana for whatever reason, medical uses, whatever, just look, what you do in your home is your business. If you go and announce that to the landlord or the housing authority, you have to keep in mind, just because state law says you can do it doesn't mean that federal law does. And federal law doesn't allow for that. Keep your mouth. You better mind your mouth. If you're going to smoke a little bit, do it in your bathroom. Don't tell nobody about that kind of stuff. You don't pull out your I look smart marijuana card and think you're going to get away, because if the housing authority finds out you're doing that, you're done. So moving on to criminal records. Illicit activities, which may include that of the use of felonies against drug convictions, especially methamphetamines. Those of you that are SO, and you know what SO is a sex offender, they're not going to deal with you. And some of you that have violent crimes against other individuals, seniors, children, animals, so on, forget about it. And just to be clear, guys, I want to make crystal clear in terms of my office's position on this as well. I do also discriminate, because if you have abused an animal, a child, or senior, or other person, my office will not take your case ever. For any reason, I will dump it and get rid of you. Okay. That is my personal belief. That's how I see it. But of all the shit you can do on this planet, those things I don't agree with. And so you just have to find a different consultant to help you if you ever reach out to us. Now, if there's a situation where it's between you and another female, and it isn't a bad one, then there may be some latitude there. But children, seniors, and animals, no, especially animals and children. All right, moving on from there. So let's move on to, again, the criminal record, methamphetamines, violent crimes, and crimes within the past 5 years. There's some flexibility on felonies in the past, as long as you guys have a little bit of distance between that and then. I think that criminal records do not generally play a big part in whether or not you receive a voucher, except for the exceptions I gave you. It's more of an issue with landlords. So I would imagine if you already have that type of criminal record, then you already know the plight that you're going to be battling against. Now, tomorrow's video, and we're not closing out this video yet. I'm just going to mention briefly what tomorrow is going to happen. We're going to be talking about types of programs and vouchers. I'm going to loosely touch this here because I think you guys need to understand that not only are you considering what you qualify to get into the system, but you should understand there are different fundamental systems at play for different types of people. If you are a person with zero income, this housing choice vouchers are not appropriate. You would need to be addressing a continuum of care program for emergency housing voucher. If you're a veteran, you served in war, so on, then we will be discussing HUD-VASH, which is specific to you. You have a lot more latitude with that program than the general voucher. In other words, it's a superpowered voucher. And those of you who are seniors, there are different programs specifically designed for you that intersect with this, as well as the homeless. So those are four categories where things kind of diverge into different programs, and we're going to go through those tomorrow. Tomorrow's goal is an introduction to those systems, not to give you full explanations. We're going to explore them individually as we go. And that's what back to basics really is to make sure you guys understand what the hell you're getting involved in before you commit anywhere from 4 months of your life to years or even decades. So I'm going to say good morning to a few people that are in the channel. Emmy, does having a lot of bills lower the rent? If so, will bills reduce it? So in income calculations, you have what we call negative assets, and there are different things and different types of bills that can be considered deductions. Okay. Figuring out rent calculations and the amount of rent you're going to receive can be an issue. It's a complex issue that covers around 200 pages of calculations. That's why most PHAs don't have their housing workers do it, because they're not trained to. They usually subcontract that kind of stuff. But yes, to answer your question, it does. And it often involves medical bills, equipment, and so on, as well as other costs, pet costs, and so on. But we could go deeply into that one. And I think that that's a topic that I will likely cover in the Back to Basics videos I'll be doing from now through summer. Promo code lady. I like that. Interesting name of the day. So promo, we'll call you code lady. In section 811, housing, is it normal for the housing authority to mail an annual 25-page renewal application to a resident to complete by hand and mail it back who just moved in 4 months ago? Well, I got to tell you, first I want you to keep one thing in mind, promo lady. There's over 3,500 housing authorities. You may have some that may have very small amount of paperwork, and then some that have a lot. That's a very contentious issue. Typically, an annual is done once a person's participated for a year. However, if the housing authority decides in its administrative plan that they're going to pick a certain day of the year, then it's perfectly possible that you're the unlucky person that just got levied with 25 pages. But for the sake of what you have, even if it was 25 pages, just do it. Do it and just be happy that you're not struggling to find a voucher. I know that's probably not the most exciting news for you, but you're done for another year, And if you just said you're in Los Angeles, that explains exactly why they need as much paperwork as a doctor's office. They love to drown themselves in paperwork in Los Angeles. I think sometimes that's how they earn paychecks. They just find crazy shit to do. Do math on toilet paper in the bathroom, make unnecessary calls. I mean, Leisha is a hot mess. It goes back to some earlier videos where we talked about 91 people being indicted in the New York Housing Authority over there in Queens. I often wondered when Leisha would end up going and being raided by HUD. I know they got better. I know they're on the hit list. I know that for sure. All right, guys. So looking at that, we're looking at different categories, but fundamentally, the lower the income you are, in terms of medium income, is going to qualify to get this. But again, this is just a ticket. You're popping a ticket to get your foot in the door. It doesn't mean jack else. So I got a lot of clients call me, hey Jay, you know what? I've only got $1 to my name. I only receive $1,000 a month, and I've got a disability. Don't I qualify as the most important person on the planet? Shouldn't I be the first person in the room to receive the voucher? Not really, because everybody that wants into this is low income to start with, and everybody on the planet's disabled that usually participates. So nothing, when you are a larger part of something that everybody else is already doing, then there's nothing unique unless you're missing one eyeball, one earlobe, 2 legs, and a tooth. And then you add that with a combination of other factors, then we can start talking about power in your case. Now, I'm giving, of course, an extreme example, but I think that many cases can be improved. Think about it logically. Most people that are here and thinking about this, you think about federal law in this way. They're telling you in those federal rules or Code of Federal Regulations and titles, here's what will allow to happen if you meet this thing. Now, if you don't know what they actually require, then how are you ever going to hope to meet that? You're leaving yourself at the mercy of rules that you don't even understand or can even qualify or even meet. But if you do know what they are, then you may find out that what you personally think makes you qualify is far from what the government thinks. In other words, cases can be improved. See it all the time. I've had people, man, they've got cancer. Oh, I'm not disabled. Well, honey, what exactly do you think you are? I've got people in wheelchairs with a missing leg. I'm not disabled. They're just too fucking proud. And so they literally put on the application, I'm not disabled at all. And they just lost 40% of their consideration because they've not established that they've lost a couple legs yet. And so that's an extreme example of what I see all the time. And that's people think they don't understand what the government and what rules and policies are requiring. And so they never meet them, despite it actually being the caseworker at the housing. They don't give a damn. She can see you with all your legs and arms gone. And if you believe that you're not disabled, then she believes that you're not disabled. She's not going to check the box for you. You just simply lose all around. And for many of you that are older, pride kills you guys, especially my seniors and those that come from good professional backgrounds where they've always been a have and not a have not. They have a hard time thinking about and registering the concept that they've gone from being the high to the less than mighty. It's a hard thing to swallow when you retire and you're entering into a system that treats you badly, because guess what? You don't have the money to buy yourself good treatment. It's a tough system, but if you're willing and able to deal with some adversity, not wear your feelings on your shoulders, then you can get through this system. You have to be intelligent. You have to instead of giving up and throwing your hands up, you have to consider getting mad and determined. And that's another thing my seniors do well. Because once you make somebody that's much older, a senior man, they don't just give up. They actually become persistent, highly persistent, and don't give up. In other words, they're going to get what they want to get. I wish I could teach that to my younger clients that throw their hands up and want to say, up it. So, moral of the story is, to qualify, you need a low income, as little of a criminal record as possible. And to be frank with you, you can be a single person and do just as fine as a family. However, we must keep in mind in the background of all housing authorities, they are funded specific ways to give out vouchers for specific reasons. And that's why tomorrow's video is going to address the many types of programs and vouchers and how you can how your answers on your application will inevitably help you qualify for different programs, though they're not going to tell you up front. I know a lot of you guys have questions about Section 811, Section 202, HUD-VASH, HOPWA, BAWA, and I can go down a list of around 138 of them. Now, tomorrow we're not going to cover 138. We're going to cover the most common ones because I don't feel like making videos with 8 views. In other words, if they're giving out vouchers for Martians, then I won't be covering that, even if it's a really juicy one, okay? Well, guys, I've enjoyed talking this morning. Again, qualifying for vouchers is really an 8-minute video, except for when I make them, then it turns into much longer. So I think the one you're going to enjoy the most will be Sunday. Please do join me between 9 and 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Keep in mind, guys, we're from all over the nation. We don't all live in the same time zone. It could be 10 a.m. here, could be 8 a.m. California, or it could be 10 a.m. for me and 11 a.m. in New York. The best I can do is the times that I want to work, and that's when you guys will see me. So you're going to learn about all the programs tomorrow. Some pencil, pad, notebooks, whatever you take your notes with. You're sure to enjoy that one. My name is Jay. I'm the owner of Section 8 Consulting, and I've enjoyed talking with you this Saturday morning. Bye for now.